Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was the person who did most to unmask the absolute horrors of communist totalitarianism, said that he believed that the Nuremberg judgments were the most important event of the 20th century. And that was the judgment at the end of World War II, that there were certain actions that no one was to undertake, no matter what their cultural background was, because they were, let's say, crimes against humanity. That there was such a thing as universal evil. And you can debate that, you know, I mean, and people certainly have, but the problem is if you debate that, then you have to say that there are conditions under which the sorts of things that happened, say, in the concentration camps, which would be the gassing of children after their torture and their forcible removal from their parents and all the terrible things that went along with that, that's just okay. It's just an opinion. It's just something that happened, and there are circumstances under which that's justifiable. If there's no transcendent good and evil underneath that argument, it's only a matter of practicality. And it seems to me that that's not the right conclusion to draw. That's how it seems to me, and that's what Solzhenitsyn concluded when he looked at the Nuremberg trials. So the notion that it was good, well, even if you don't believe that, and you know, because maybe it's not as good as it could be, I would say it's incumbent on you as someone who participates in the process of furthering creation to act as if it could be good at least, and to further that with all of your efforts. Partly because what the hell else do you have to do that could possibly be better than that could possibly justify your existence more than that? And you know perfectly well, if you have any sense at all, if you think clearly about it at all, is that that's what you want to see in everyone else. You know, you're desperate and maybe you're cynical, and now and then someone appears that acts at least momentarily like a light in the darkness, and that lifts your spirit up and gives you a little bit of hope and maybe helps you continue on. Well, that's obviously a call to being. It's a statement from your own soul that says, well, there's something about that's how you should be. And maybe then, well, we get a chance to participate in what is good. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kind, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. I like that. You see, it's interesting, these old pictures, because if you look here, you got this halo around God's head, and you've got this split again between night and darkness, and God's right on the border between the two. And that's the sun, right? That's what a halo is. A halo is the sun or the moon. Sometimes it's like a coin. You know, you have the queen's head on the coin, and that's the queen on the moon, and it's silver, and it's a symbol of value, because of course the queen is sovereign, and the moon is the sovereign of the night sky, and gold, of course, is the sun, and gold is pure because it doesn't mix with other metals, and it shines like the sun, so it partakes of the sun, and God partakes of the sun because there's something about whatever he represents that's associated with consciousness and illumination and enlightenment, and it's that force of illumination and enlightenment that's right on the border between these two sets of phenomena, and that's kind of what that picture is trying to present. And so, you know, it's a metaphor, that's one way of thinking about it, but it does, again, allude to the underlying idea that there's something about consciousness that's integral to being itself. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years. I mean, that's a remarkable bit of writing there too, because you just think about how bloody long it took our caveman ancestors to look at the night sky and start to figure out that there were repeating patterns across years that enabled them to mark the seasons. I mean, I just can't imagine how they figured that out. It's the degree of careful observation that it took. And I mean, we know people figured that out a long time ago, because you know, those great megalithic monuments like Stonehenge seem to be astronomical observatories, essentially, and you see the same thing with the pyramids. I mean, people were looking at the damn sky, trying to figure out, looking at God, you know, because that's kind of what you're doing when you're looking at the night sky, trying to figure out the regularity and order in the universe, and that's all compacted into this little line, you know, and let them be for signs and for seasons, to be oriented by the stars. Amazing. And then let them be lights in the expanse of heavens to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night. And so there's an idea of sovereignty there too, right? That there's an analogy between the ruler and the heavenly bodies that light up the darkness, essentially. And that's a really interesting idea too, because it took us a long time to come to terms with, as I mentioned last week, to come to terms with the idea of sovereignty itself and to decide what constituted valid power. And it's not power. It's not power. It's authority and competence and not power. It's not dominance either. It's more sophisticated than that, because the people that you want to rule aren't people who have power, because power just means I can hurt you and you can't hurt me back. That's not what you need from a ruler, even though it devolves into that from time to time. What you want is the kind of wisdom that illuminates the darkness, and to associate the sovereign with the heavenly kings of the light is a perfectly reasonable thing to do from a metaphoric perspective. And that's an ancient, ancient idea, you know, and another example of how we're grounded in a dream. And God set them in the expanse of heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Another emphasis on the fact that it was better that there was something than nothing. And, you know, maybe you could consider that the declaration of the cosmos is something like, well, it's better that there's something than nothing. And, well, how do you know that? And I guess the answer to that is that there's something instead of nothing. And I know that that's not proof, but it's still a remarkable fact that it happens to be the case, and no one does know why that is. And so maybe we should go along with it and see what we can do with it, you know, and see how we could make it better, because we certainly could if we were really committed to it, and we shook our resentment and our anger and our hatred. And I know there's reason for all of that, because people do suffer terribly, but, you know, God only knows what being could be like if we all contributed to it to the best of our ability. God only knows what we could conquer, and what sort of magnificent cities we could produce, and what things we could eradicate from the suffering of the world. And there was, you know, there's this guy I read about, this is amazing, and I don't remember his name, but he found out about this worm that was called the guinea worm. And guinea worm is a really horrible thing, and you can look it up if you want, but I'll tell you a little bit about it, even though it's very distasteful. So a guinea worm is a parasite that lives in Africa, and it burrows under your skin, and it's quite long. It's about that long, and it's, you know, about that wide, and so it'll burrow underneath your leg, and then it's in there, you know, and maybe it pokes its little head out a hole, which is one of its delightful tendencies. And then if you want to pull it out, it breaks, right? Obviously, because otherwise you'd just pull it out and it would be dead. And so it doesn't like that, so it just breaks off. And many, many people had this horrible disease, you know, and well, you can't imagine what that would be like, because you're part of the 1% and you live in North America, and thank God for that. But, you know, just a little imagine, you don't even want to think about it, let alone have it. And he went to Africa and wiped the damn thing out. It's like, well, great, you know, it seems to me the planet's a lot better off without any guinea worms on it. Even though that's like guinea worm genocide talk, I'm still, you know, pretty happy about it. And so that was one guy who thought, well, we don't need these things. And yeah, well, fair enough, you know, and yeah, well, so good for him. Like, you know, I mean, he can die thinking that the world's a better place than it was when he first popped out, and so good for that. I think that's a good aim, you know, I think, is to think that when you're on your deathbed, and you can look back and think, well, there's a little less suffering in the world from here on out than there would be if I had never existed. And that's a lot better than the opposite, because it's certainly possible, say, if you're Stalin, to ensure that there's a hell of a lot more suffering in the world than there would have been if you hadn't lived. And we perfectly well know that people can manage that, and that many, many people try to do nothing but manage precisely that. So, and it's hard for me not to think about that as some sort of metaphysical evil, and I think it's the right way to look at it.
If you like this video, please give this a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more content like it, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and have a beautiful day.